You're listening to The Main Event with Zach Gelb and Chase Sr. on WHIP.
That's us, WHIP Radio here in Philadelphia. Time in the studio is 11:33. Zach Gelb and Chase Sr. here with you, getting you ready for tonight's Monday night matchup between the Eagles and the Panthers. Eagles had some injuries a week ago up against the Houston Texans. D'Amico Ryans is out for the year. Nick Foles will miss some times. So you do implement Mark Sanchez on the offensive side of the ball. And now joining us on the hotline is a Pro Football Hall of Fame writer. You could also catch him on Comcast SportsNet and WIP. And that's our good friend and Temple University alumni, Ray Didinger. Ray, Zach, and Chase here in Philly. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you guys doing?
Well, we're doing great, and we appreciate you giving us a few minutes today. And Mark Sanchez, you saw two quarterbacks when he was the starting quarterback in New York. You saw a guy at time that led them to two AFC Conference Championship games, managed the football game, beat some good quarterbacks over the course of his time with New York when he took down Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in the same postseason and almost took down Big Ben as they lost that AFC Championship game by a score of 24-19. And then we also saw a quarterback that produced a plethora of turnovers. Mark Sanchez, in my opinion, I looked at Nick Foles this year, and so far what we saw in the small sample space, he turned the ball over a lot, and Mark Sanchez just really has to go out there and manage the game tonight, and the play calling can't let him throw the ball over more than 30, 35 times a game. What's your expectations for Mark Sanchez as he gets ready to take over the keys to the card tonight as he's the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, I think if everybody else does their job, I think that Mark will do his. I certainly don't expect, nor would I suggest that the Chip call for 62 pass attempts the way he did with Nick Foles a couple weeks ago. I think the 30 number is probably a pretty good number. If he throws in around there, I think that's good. I think that the running game seems to be coming along. I mean, the last 4 games they're averaging almost 5 yards a carry. Shady McCoy is starting to look like the Shady McCoy of a year ago. Polk is healthy and has given them more of a power back presence inside the red zone. And Sproles has been really, from the day he arrived, a really dynamic, change of pace kind of guy and a great receiver out of the backfield. So all the other elements kind of are there in that offense. I don't really think some people are talking about this is all about Mark Sanchez, and no, I don't think that at all. I think that if everything else in his offense kind of comes together and the line performs well and the backs run the ball and Kelly sticks with the running game, then Mark Sanchez doesn't have to go out and win this game by himself. And if it turns into that kind of a game, I think he'll be fine. A lot of people don't like the term game manager. I mean, I know the players don't like the term game manager, but in effect, right now, that's really all you're going to ask this guy to be. And if everybody else does their job, I think he'll do his.
This is a Eagles offense that their offensive line has been decimated with injuries this year, but hey, that's part of the league, but they're starting to get healthy now. And you talk about that run game. This is a Panthers team that's 26th in the league up against the run, a defense that has done a complete 180 from a year ago. This looks like a favorable matchup, though, on the offensive side of the ball for the Eagles tonight, just because of the deficiencies of the defensive side of the ball for the Panthers, especially up against the run.
I think it's true. I think this is a good spot for Sanchez, really, in many ways. I think it's a good opponent. You got the Panthers coming in here; they're not playing well at all. I mean, they're 1-5-1 in their last 7 games. The defense, as you point out, has not played well. I mean, Luke Kuechly is playing great football. I mean, he's probably right now playing better than any middle linebacker in football. But the problem is, from Carolina's standpoint, he's the only guy in the front 7 playing well. Everybody else is kind of lost their way, it would seem. I mean, they've really missed Greg Hardy. They haven't really replaced Greg Hardy, and as a result, the whole defensive line has really sort of fallen apart. But I do think the Eagles are going to be able to run the ball tonight. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the game plan. I think that Chip Kelly we saw last year is a coach who likes to run the ball. If you look at last year's pass-to-run ratio, it was 53-47, which is, I think that's kind of typical of what he was at Oregon, too. I think he likes to run the ball. And now that he's got basically his offensive line back together, and he's got a pretty nice 3-back combination to run the ball, I think you're going to see it. Early in the season, they were throwing the ball a lot, and a couple weeks ago they threw it way too much. But I think now, from this point forward, I think you're going to see them start to run the ball more. And tonight you got an opponent in here where that's been their biggest problem is they can't stop the run. So from a matchup standpoint, this looks like a very favorable one for the Eagles and for Mark Sanchez.
Ray, working off that as we're talking to Ray Didinger of Comcast SportsNet, in that game against the Texans, we saw an Eagles team that ran for just under 200 yards. Do you think that Chip Kelly kind of found an identity with his team, with the three-headed monster, all of those running backs healthy? Do you think that they want to establish the run and kind of establish that identity of beating people up on the offensive line and running the football effectively?
Oh, sure. I think that's what that's what you saw him do last year, and really, if you watched his Oregon teams, they ran the ball a lot. I mean, people used to see the numbers they put up, the stats they put up, the scores, the points, the yards, and if you didn't watch Oregon, people assumed that they threw it all over the place. They thought it was kind of a BYU approach, and that's not really the case. I mean, Chip Kelly, he likes to run the ball, and he likes to create matchup issues for the defense. And one of the things he does really well is whatever the defense is playing, he'll go the other way. So if teams are playing the pass, he'll run it. If teams are playing the run, he'll pass it. But at the end of the day, he kind of likes to be somewhere around 55-45. I think that's what he's trying to achieve. And early in this year, when they had all the problems on the offensive line and they really couldn't run the ball, it sort of pushed them into a more pass-heavy kind of mode, which it didn't really work all that well. I think it caused a lot of Nick Foles' problems, and it's kind of remarkable, actually, that we're sitting here talking about a 6-2 team because they did go through some stretches where they were way too mistake-prone and made things way too hard on themselves. But now that I think the offensive line is getting whole, and you really can't overstate how important it is getting Evan Mathis back tonight, because now starting from this point forward, you're going to have that whole left side of your line is going to be intact now. You're going to have Kelsey at center, you'll have Mathis at left guard, and you'll have Peters at left tackle. And if you looked at last year's team, I mean, they ran the ball a lot to the left side, and that was where McCoy had his greatest success. And now you got all those pieces in place. So, yeah, I think you're going to see this team run the ball more from this point forward. And, you know, McCoy will get his carries, but they'll also find time for Sproles. And I think they now realize that in short yardage and goal line situations, Polk is a very live option. So, yeah, I think from that standpoint, a lot of things on this offense are starting to come together. And, you know, Mark Sanchez steps into a situation where people are expecting a lot from him, but I think he's going to have a lot of help to try and get it done.
Ray, you lose your signal caller on defense in D'Amico Ryans, and Chip Kelly called him Mufasa after the game. It's impossible to fill his shoes. But what's your confidence level in Casey Matthews and Emmanuel Acho as they're going to be the ones calling the plays on the defense? I know Matthews has been playing better of late after he barely made this team, but where do you stand on Matthews and Acho filling in for D'Amico Ryans?
Well, they're not going to be the same guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's going to be a drop-off, and I think everybody knows that. I mean, even Matthews and Acho would concede that. I mean, they're not going to come in and beat D'Amico Ryans. They don't have his experience. They don't have his resume, and they don't have the same, I don't want to say respect among the teammates, but they don't have the same kind of stature. Yeah, and they can't in situations on the field where you need that veteran leader, that guy that you kind of look for. Well, he's not going to be there now. But I do believe that Matthews has played better. I mean, people have made him kind of a whipping boy the last couple of years, and a bad draft pick, and kind of a leftover from that Juan Castillo, Andy Reid sad chapter of 2011-2012. But the fact is, if you want to be fair, in the last month, with the opportunities he's been given, he has played better. I think Bill Davis has done a very good job of putting him in situations and giving him responsibilities that he can handle. And the fact that he's had a little success has given him a little more confidence than he's had before. So I think he'll be okay. I don't think he's going to be a weakness necessarily, but I don't think anybody expects him to step and beat D'Amico Ryans. It's that sort of level of player and that veteran leader presence is something that you're going to miss, and that's something they're going to have to learn to live without.
And not only the leadership, too, but in addition to that communication onto the field, what are you going to look early on in this game tonight when Cam Newton does have the ball in the first few series that the Eagles look for at a communication side of the ball when you look at the defensive side of the ball?
Make sure everybody's lined up right. Make sure that nobody's out of position. Make sure that all the gaps are covered. Cam Newton poses a lot of problems because once the ball is snapped, he can sort of redraw the play with his own ability. I mean, he can take a play that's meant to be a pass and turn it into a 40-yard run. He can also come off one receiver that's meant to be a check down and chuck it 50 yards down the field because he has that kind of arm. That's the challenge that Cam Newton presents. Now, he hasn't played particularly well this year. And in fact, in this recent skid now, he's actually played very poorly. But on any given night, and who knows, this could be the night, it could all kind of click for him. I mean, he's in terms of physical gifts, he's about as good as any quarterback there is out there. So the Eagles' defense has to be very attentive to that. They can't make any obvious mistakes. They can't have any breakdowns. They can't leave anybody open because he's capable of, if you blow a coverage or you leave somebody open, even if he's 60 yards downfield, Cam Newton has the ability to get the ball there.
Ray Didinger is our guest. A few more questions with the Pro Football Hall of Fame writer. You can catch him on Comcast, SportsNet, and WIP. Zach Gelb and Chase Sr. here with you for WHIP in Philadelphia via iHeartRadio. And Ray, I was at that Giants game, the blowout of the game that was 27-0, and I was very impressed with the Eagles' front seven. You see that front seven improving each and every week. Let's look at the edges tonight, because you look at these Carolina Panthers tackles. They've enabled a lot of pressure this year on Cam Newton from the outside, from the left tackle and the right tackle spots. This looks like another favorable matchup for the Eagles. I know they're missing DeMeco Ryans, but especially coming off of the edges going up against the Panthers tonight. Should be.
I mean, you look at the matchups on paper, and you would say they favor the Eagles. The Panthers really missed. Jordan Gross was an anchor for them at tackle for many years, and he's gone now, and they haven't really replaced him. They've had other injuries on the offensive line that have hurt them and have really contributed to the problems that they've had. I think they might get a couple players back tonight that have been out for a while, which may give them a little bit better play between the tackles. But on the edges, yeah, I think the Eagles have a chance to generate a lot of pressure with Barwin, with Trent Cole, with Brandon Graham coming off the bench, and with Vinny Curry coming up the middle. I think that they'll get pressure, but we've all seen Cam Newton in the past, and you can get pressure on him, and you can get people around him, and you can get your hands on him. But bringing him down is a different matter. He's a big, strong guy who can really run. Then we saw a couple of years ago, I mean, they came into Philadelphia, and Cam Newton came into Philadelphia for a primetime game, not playing well, and the team was not playing well. And Newton came out here and lit it up in that game. I mean, he ran for two, and he threw for two, and the Panthers won going away. So that's why anybody that thinks that this is going to be easy tonight, or this is going to be a walkover, or a very comfortable, 4 quarters win, I think the Eagles are going to win. But I think you should remember what happened a couple of years ago. That the Panthers, right now, their record isn't very good, and they obviously aren't anywhere near what they were a year ago. But they still have some dangerous players, and they've got a real dangerous one at quarterback. The Eagles have to be mindful of that and play good, solid football for 4 quarters. I think they'll come out ahead, but this may be a little bit more challenging and a little scarier than some people think.
Before we let you run, Ray, because of the injuries on the offensive line, Matt Tobin was thrust into a role in which he saw a lot of playing time. He's gotten a couple of starts in the last couple of weeks. You watch a lot of film. Is there a big drop-off from Todd Herremans to Matt Tobin with the way Tobin's been playing of late?
Well, I think there's a drop-off. Mm-hmm. There's an experience factor there that's pretty obvious. I mean, Todd Herremans has played a lot of games, and Tobin is still brand new. But he's got ability. I mean, you can see that he's certainly got the size, he's got the strength, and he plays hard. His technique is not what you would like it to be at this point, but he'll get better as he plays more. I think that he can be adequate in that spot. But I thought that Herremans had played well earlier this year. Last year was not a good year for Todd, but he came back this year. He looked like he was in good shape, and he had played pretty well. When the Eagles were having some problems on the line and they were working with a lot of new people, I thought that Todd played pretty well when you consider he didn't have Lane Johnson for the first month and he didn't have Kelsey. I mean, there were a lot of games where he was out there kind of by himself on that right side, and I thought he played really well. So losing him is a loss, but Tobin's got a lot of snaps under his belt now, and even though he's going to have to switch sides, I don't think that'll be a big problem because he'll have Kelsey to his left and he'll have Lane Johnson to his right. Again, similar to Sanchez, if he doesn't try to do too much, if he just takes care of his responsibilities and does his job, I think he'll be fine.
Ray, before we let you run, every time we do bring you on, everyone goes, Ray Didinger doesn't have a cell phone. And I go, yes, we all know that. I don't think there's a better guest in the league than you when it comes to connection-wise on your phone. It's just absolutely incredible. You sound like you're here in studio with us, Ray.
Well, I'm probably the last of the landline interviews. That probably counts for it.
It's a rarity.
That is true. Every time we try to get someone, we say, do you have a landline? They always go, no, I only got a cell phone. They don't even have a landline anymore at their home. But we do appreciate the time today, Ray Didinger. We do appreciate it. Thanks so much and enjoy the game tonight.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, fellas. Have a good day.
You too. Ray Didinger right there on the hotline, Philly's #1 college radio station, WHIP.